The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
NIMBYs prefer the status quo. Not in my backyard, right? However, most everyone else wants housing. They want in. Tonight we'll hear how both environmental assessments and heritage designations aren't always used for their intended purposes or the best interests of the community. First up, Ontario's Minister of Finance is here to explain how the province seems to have turned a projected $13.5 billion deficit into a $2.1 billion surplus. It's Wednesday, October 12th, and that's tonight on The Agenda. Did you see the numbers coming out of Queen's Park the other day? The books of the province of Ontario have gone from a rather massive deficit to a rather modest surplus. No one predicted it, but the fact that it happened now leads to all sorts of unexpected permutations for our next guest. Peter Bethlenfalvy is Ontario's Minister of Finance and the MPP for Pickering-Uxbridge, and he joins us now, I'm happy to say, in the studio, as opposed to on a Skype feed or something like that. It's good to see you in person.
It's great to see you again, Steve.
Thank you for being here. We're going to start by just sharing. You want to call for these, or should I?
Put it on the tape, Sheldon.
There we go. Okay, Sheldon, if you would, here's what happened to the province's ledger sheet over the past year. The original deficit from the March 2021 budget was anticipated at $33.1 billion. And then only a couple of months ago, the estimate was $13.5 billion. But the actual result turned into a $2.1 billion surplus. Now that is, I think it's fair to say, a rather unprecedented turnaround, and I wonder if you saw it coming.
Well, we updated the numbers as we went along, but you know, you think about when you put the budget together in February of 2021, what's the environment? Well, Delta was hitting us pretty hard, pretty gloomy environment for the economy, for dealing with the pandemic. And then as we went through the year, we updated those numbers, and you just highlighted by August of this year, we updated it again. And what occurred there was we got out of COVID, thankfully, and here we are in person again. But it also highlighted that the inflation was higher than any economist had expected. The economy rebounded more than anyone expected. So I think every jurisdiction around the world felt that. And we were not immune from that.
When the Ministry of Finance officials came to you and briefed you on the numbers, did you say to them, go back and take a second look at it, this can't be true?
No, but you want to make sure you understand the drivers of those numbers, and a big part of it is the revenue side, and of course with the economy, as I just said, growing faster than any economist. We get private sector forecasts out there, inflation higher than most had expected.
How much of this is that?
It's the lion's share. It's the lion's share. And I would say this as well, Steve, you know, you look across the country, you know, Ontario wasn't the only one. In fact, our difference was much smaller than any other province. You know, you look at Alberta that had a much bigger delta, primarily because of the price of oil, but every province, BC, Quebec, and the feds are going to come out with their numbers. It'll be the same story. It's also important to point out that that was for the year ended March 31st. So it is really a look back in time.
It's rearview mirror, but still, it's a hell of a turnaround. And, you know, I think one of the things we want to do here is sort of explain to people watching and listening how this happened. Obviously, you've got revenues that are up in terms of sales taxes people paid and income taxes that people paid, and companies paid more corporate taxes. So all those things went up. And there's inflation that you talked about, and I guess federal transfers. That'd be part of the picture as well. As you look at all of those different things, can you sort of help us understand what's most responsible for all of what just transpired?
It's a great question. The simple way I look at it is just the size of the economy. And so if you look at the forecast back in March of 2021 versus where we ended up, big difference, big change. The other thing is the number of people working. You know, if we're locked down, people aren't working, they're not getting raises. So that's a big factor. And the other factor that you don't really find out in pieces is how many people are selling stocks or dividends or selling, you know, investments, real estate investments, and that's collected by the federal government. And then remitted to us. But we look at the overall economy as the benchmark, and that's why we're a little bit concerned now in the sense that the economy is lower than the economists forecasted. So that's what we're dealing with right now.
I don't mean this next question to sound as dripping with sarcasm as you probably think it will sound, but you're not an unbiased observer to these things either. How much of what's transpired happened because of what you would call your wise stewardship of the economy, and how much of it was you just happened to be the right guy at the right place at the right time while the economy was booming back?
No, I didn't detect any sarcasm in that question at all. I think, what's important in all of this is that no one has a perfect crystal ball. What is really important, I think, and coming from the private sector, if you're a CEO of a company and you've got shareholders, you go out every quarter and you tell them how the results are and what you think is going to come around the corner. So every 90 days, I'm out there, good, bad, or ugly, telling the people of Ontario, this is how we're spending your money, this is where we're going. And that's why it's also important to really have a plan. My budget, which was turned out to be the campaign platform, was kind of a transparent plan. This is how we plan to go forward, and we'll update you every 90 days on how we're doing.
Well, let me do what you just suggested, which is see if we can peek around that corner a little bit, and you tell us was this really a one-shot deal, or is this a sign of things to come?
Well, as I said, the private forecasters that we rely on are now downgrading their forecasts. Obviously the accumulation of higher interest rates, global geopolitical risks, other factors are having an impact on the economy. And we still are projecting, when I went out in August for the first quarter results, an $18.8 billion deficit for this year. And so this is an environment right now where we have a lot of uncertainty. The economic environment is uncertain. A lot of people are hurting in this environment. The price of a lot of things is much higher. And that's part of our job to continue to monitor that. And so I'll be out for the fall economic statement on or before November 15th to update the people of Ontario again how we're spending their money and how our plan is working.
I'm going to ask you more about that economic statement in a few minutes, but I just want to circle back on some of this stuff that we're talking about as it relates to last year. Did I read this right? Was growth in the province of Ontario at 12% year over year last year?
Well, that's including inflation. Most of the GDP you look at is real GDP, which means you take out inflation, and Bank of Canada targets 2% inflation, so plus or minus. So real GDP typically 2 to 4%. We're in an environment where the inflation, we haven't seen that, Steve. You haven't seen that since you were a young college
student.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me.
Me too, by the way. So we're in that same boat. We haven't seen interest rates or inflation at this level, so that has an impact on what we call the nominal GDP and the size of the economy. Obviously, inflation is coming down, but still very high. Interest rates are going up, and that hurts a lot of people and businesses.
But presumably we're going back to the more typical 1%, 2%, 3% growth rates that we've seen basically for the last 25 years?
Well, once you take out inflation, we are targeting growth, and we have like to think we have a great plan to build this economy, and that's a lot of our focus in the campaign. A lot of infrastructure investments. I just came from Pickering this morning, where we, along with the Premier, did the grand opening of the Kubota 560,000 square foot facility, 250 new jobs. This is the type of thing that I think the people of Ontario want.
You ever driven one of those things?
I've sat in one.
You sat in one for the photo op this morning?
Have you?
I haven't driven one, but I've seen them. They're big.
Yeah, and you're seeing them, construction and farming equipment, you're seeing that right across the province.
Let's do a little budgeting 101 here for our viewers. When you, as the treasurer of the province, run a deficit, it means you basically got to go at the markets, you got to borrow money in order to pay for the shortfall of what you've committed to spend. You had a surplus last year, apparently, which means you found $2.1 billion extra in your pocket you didn't anticipate having. Where does that $2.1 billion go?
Well, in that case, we put it against the accumulated debt.
You just paid down debt.
And the lower deficit also means, in that case, a surplus, we can pay down debt, but lower deficits means that we don't have to borrow as much. When we don't borrow as much, we're not paying as much for interest, so we can spend it on other things.
Do you have the final decision as finance minister to make that call? In other words, to pay down debt as opposed to take that money and spend it on other things?
I make recommendations to our cabinet, to our premier, and those recommendations are either accepted or not. And let's just say the finance minister has a lot of say in the direction that you go.
That was the recommendation you made, and
Yes.
presumably the Premier took your recommendation.
Yeah, no, I think, before the pandemic, where we spared no expense in fighting COVID, and by the way, I still have in this year's budget money set aside for battling COVID, the remnants of it, testing, tutoring support, that sort of thing, for kids to catch up. But, you do have a say, and we were the most indebted sovereign in the world before.
Sub-sovereign jurisdiction.
Sub-sovereign, I should say. Sub-sovereign. Before, we have accumulated a lot of debt since 1867, since Confederation. So, we make choices about the investments that we're making and what we do if we have a surplus.
Needless to say, there were others who thought that they had better ideas for that surplus than paying down debt. They see needs out there, and their advice to you would have been, don't put that money towards debts accumulated already. You probably should have spent it on something else. Healthcare, education, the environment, the justice system, whatever. Why did you not do that?
We did do that.
With that $2.1 billion?
If you look at the investments that we made in that fiscal year, historic investments in healthcare. We increased the healthcare budget by a significant amount. We're doing it again
You're up
this
to
year.
$75 billion now in healthcare.
Yeah, and if you looked at it, if you look back 4 years ago, when we came into power, what the expenditures were. So significant investments. Why are we making significant investments in education, in healthcare, in social services, in infrastructure? Because that's the right thing to do when you have an aging population in healthcare, when COVID exposes some of the lack of investments over the last decade or two. If you look at my riding of Pickering-Uxbridge going back, the Ajax Pickering Hospital is right now beside a new facility for the Ajax Pickering long-term care facility. There were 0 beds built in Ajax or Pickering for 7 years up to 2018. 0.
You mean zero or zero net beds?
Zero net new beds in.
Zero net new. So some were built, but others were closed down.
Yeah, so no, but the aging population is just math. It's increasing rapidly. You and I are heading towards that.
Speak for yourself.
Okay, I'll just speak for. I'm aging and not Steve. He's staying the same. So my point being that we have to make a lot of investments, not just in physical infrastructure, hospitals, highways, public transit, long-term care facilities. We need the people to be able to staff those facilities. Long-term care needs personal support workers, nurses. So these investments you'll see in what we did in 2021 and what we're doing again this fiscal year, historic and unprecedented investments to build for today and for tomorrow.
I wonder if there wasn't a part of you, though, that when you found out that you did run a surplus last year, said, normally this would be good news, but I'm not sure this is actually good news right now, because I've been telling people for a long time that the cupboard is bare, and we've got these public sector negotiations with the teacher unions and with the educational assistants and so on, and I've been telling them for the longest time there's no money, and actually we ran a surplus last year. Does it make it harder to bargain with the public sector workers when you have this kind of buoyant fiscal news?
Well, again, that was a point in time last year, or that ended, in March of 2021, but March of 2022. But it goes back to the start in March of 2020.
But it conveys an impression that there's more money there than you thought.
And you look at the investments that we're making, and you look again at what we're doing this year. Historic investments in education, historic investments in healthcare, historic investments in long-term care. We're making those investments. Of course, I can't speak specifically about the negotiations with the teachers, but we said we're fair and reasonable and negotiating in good faith, and that's exactly what we're doing.
The Premier also said the other day, don't test me.
Yeah, no, well, listen, we have to continue, and I...
Don't force my hand, I think is what he said. Don't force my hand.
Yeah, look, we're at the table right now, and we'll continue to be at the table in good faith. But look at some of the other things that we've done. We've invested in building new schools. 2 new ones, I'll go back to Pickering, in North Pickering, first time in years. We are making investments in tutoring support for kids to catch up. The minister and the premier have been very clear, Steve, we need our kids in school. We can't, we want them to.
No, I get all this, and I understand why you want to trumpet your accomplishments here, and that's fine. But again, this is all about conveying to the public service or to teachers, You know, we either do have money or we don't have money. Well, now, when you were running a $33 billion deficit, I think everybody got the understanding that, you know, this is not the year to ask for 5 or 10% increase. But when you got a $2 billion surplus, can you be surprised that some of the unions out there are asking for significant increases?
You know, that surplus, again, was a point in time in the past, you know, 6 months ago. In the current fiscal year, we're projecting an $18.8 billion deficit. I'll have an update by the fall economic statement by November 15th. But we have to be responsible at the same time as being fair and reasonable, and we're going to continue to do that.
Does fair and reasonable include offering people 1% when inflation's at 7%?
You know, the 1%, we put that in Bill 124. Yep. That was 3 years ago. And, you know, take the teachers, for example. They've already gone through that 3-year period at 1%. What we're talking about here is higher than 1%, and that's what we have on the table.
1.25% is what you've publicly said for some teachers.
Yeah, and we've also, for the education workers, a 2% for people making under 40,000, and we're still at the table. So I don't want to talk further about that because they're at the table with the minister. They're
at the table, but your colleague, the Minister of Education, and your boss, the Premier, have both basically, in not so many words, said, if we don't get a deal with you guys, we're going to legislate you back to work. Would you agree with that?
Look, what I'm going to agree with is that the kids need to stay in school. Like, I've talked to a lot of parents. You know, this is very important. We're making historic investments in supporting our schools by increasing the funding for each student, by putting in mental health supports, by putting in tutoring supports, by building more schools, by you know, hiring more people. So, you know, this is something we all have to come together and do what's fair for the students, the parents, the teachers, but also is fair for the taxpayer.
I know, because you've said it twice already, that you plan to bring out this fall economic statement within about a month, a little over a month, within that window. Can you give us a hint about what might be in it today?
Well, I think, you know, what's important is that I'm out again, not only with the fall economic statement giving an update on the finances, but the second quarter results as well. And I really think it's important to be transparent and to be out there with that. You know, you're asking for what might be in the fall economic statement, so you're not going to fall off your chair when I say I'm not going to disclose that.
But you could give me a little hint about something. I mean, you've already said that the deficit is going to be much more significant than, you know, it's not going to be a $2 billion surplus this year. You've said that.
Well, what I'm saying is, you know, we were pretty transparent with the budget that we tabled in April. We went to the people, they endorsed that budget, I think roundly, the second biggest majority since, if you go back in time, folks, I just had a chat with Steve about Howard Ferguson, 1926, got a bigger majority the second time. So we've got support for that budget. We were called the legislature, the only one in Canada, to pass that budget, but also to get back to work for the people of Ontario. So we're just going to continue that work in the fall economic statement and give people an update on the progress that we're making.
Is it your advice to Ontarians right now, given how the forthcoming year is looking a lot less buoyant than the previous year turned out to be, do you think people ought to keep priming this economic pump by spending more, even if it means going into additional debt in order to keep the economy humming?
I think you have to certainly look at what's happened in the UK, you know, where you cut taxes and increase spending, and the markets are, you know, reacted the way they did. Negatively. I think we've had very good success in the global bond markets, in part because we've shown a plan, a fiscal plan, how we're going to build Ontario, how we're going to build infrastructure, how we're going to support labor, help keep costs down. So we've been very transparent about that, and all doing it at the same time while lowering the deficit over time. You know, we said for this year it would be 19.9. 19.8. I reduced it in the first quarter to 18.8. We'll have an update again by November 15th.
Okay. We got a minute left here, and I do want to ask you about, I think, what's the most important employer in your riding, and that is the nuclear power generating station in Pickering, which your government has decided to extend again. This is a station that's, well, it's pretty old, and I guess it was built more than 50 years ago. And I guess I want to ask you whether you are absolutely certain that this facility can be 100% safe, given that it is past its best before date.
Yeah, listen, you and I are not nuclear scientists or engineers. We'll let the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission and the experts opine on that. I think the bottom line is, apart from the great jobs and the great people that work at both the Pickering nuclear plant and the Darlington, and we're putting in a small modular reactor into the Darlington facility, is that we're a victim of our own success somewhat in Ontario. We're generating more manufacturing jobs. We're bringing jobs back to Ontario. Electric vehicle production. Those electric vehicles will need to be powered by something. We just, in Hamilton, announced that the Dofasco plant will now go green with electricity off of coal, doing the same thing up in Sault Ste. Marie. That's going to require a lot of energy. We got to think down the road a little bit, and nuclear has been proven to be safe, reliable, clean, good jobs. And so thinking about 14% of our energy is coming out of that Pickering nuclear station. It's the newer ones, not the ones that were built in the 70s, but the ones that were built in the 80s. And we've had a track record of refurbishing plants in Bruce Power in the Bruce Peninsula, as well as Darlington. That's going through right now. So we'll let the experts make sure that it's safe. But I think this is a good policy option for the people of Ontario to take a hard look at.
That's Peter Bethlenfalvy, the Minister of Finance for Ontario, MPP, as you may have heard, for Pickering-Uxbridge. We thank you for making the trip into TVO tonight.
Pleasure to be with you again in person, Steve.
Environmental assessment can be a crucial step in any development proposal to build new housing, transit, highways, or alter existing roads. When it protects sensitive ecosystems, well, it's doing its job. But some have raised concerns that it's being used to protect other interests as well. Phil Pothen is a land use planning lawyer, the Ontario Environment Program Manager at Environmental Defence, and he joins us now for more. Phil, good to have you in that chair.
Thank you very much for having me.
Want to start our conversation by reading something from a piece you wrote for the Toronto Star earlier this month. In order to deliver the first pro-environment majority that City Council has seen in years, it's time for Toronto's genuine environment voters to confront and unseat the green NIMBYs who've wormed their way into leadership within some residents' associations, as well as some suburban council seats. I confess I've been following this for a while and had never, until reading that, heard of green NIMBYs. Who are they?
Well, first of all, there's nothing actually green or environmentally friendly about green NIMBYs or green NIMBYism. NIMBYism is opposition to change and densification and often adding new housing in your own backyard.
Not in my backyard is what it stands for.
Exactly. And green NIMBYism is simply the attempt to dress up that opposition, which is based on simple self-interest or subjective aesthetic preferences, or sometimes outright environmental racism, in some kind of pseudo-environmental post-rationalization.
Environmental racism? What does that mean?
So environmental racism means the unequal distribution of environmental benefits and burdens based on race, which is a prohibited ground. And the Human Rights Commission has identified not just environmental racism, but other forms of other prohibited grounds as areas where land use planning ends up causing discrimination. So if all the homes that are affordable for people who can't afford a house in a society where we have major disparities in income based on race, if all those have to be concentrated only on main streets or only in a few pockets, and they're kept out of the leafy, quiet locations without a lot of car traffic, then what we really have is the environmental benefits being hoarded by people who aren't racialized and denied to people who are racialized.
Okay, green NIMBYism, you tell us, therefore, is a problem. And, I mean, the answer might be self-evident, but let's go through it. Why is it a problem, in your view?
Sure. Green NIMBYism, like all NIMBYism, is a massive environmental problem to the extent that governments give into it. From an environmental point of view, it is absolutely vital that we add a lot of new homes and workplaces and shops very quickly to existing low-density, so-called single detached neighborhoods. That includes mid-rise on avenues and includes high-rise around major transit stations, but it also includes walk-up apartments, townhomes, compact forms of housing in neighborhoods that are currently restricted to single detached homes.
And we should say that's probably 70% of the area in the 416.
Absolutely. And this is one of the, a major vector of discrimination and inequity is that we have much of the best land reserved for types of housing that can only be afforded by the richest strata of society in the region.
Okay, let's go back to first principles here then for a second. Environmental assessments, when they're done properly and for the right reasons, are necessary in the first place because why?
Well, environmental assessments are necessary because when we make big changes very quickly, they can cause harm, particularly if it's in areas that are unaffected, that are not heavily impacted now. So if you're building, for example, Highway 413 through the green belt and through farmland, there are likely to be very huge effects on endangered species, other species at risk, and on farmland. Those are bona fide environmental considerations. One of the problems that we have is that we've heard historically of incidents of the environmental assessment process being used in cynical ways, for example, to obstruct bike lanes in the city of Toronto for years. It was only in 2015 that we decided that we were not going to require environmental assessment for that. And that's what's allowed some of the proliferation of bike lanes since then. But what we think of as environmental assessment often isn't strictly the environmental assessment process. I should make it clear. When we're talking about green nimbyism in neighborhoods, those assessments of environmental concerns are actually channeled through rezoning, official plan amendments, and committee of adjustment approvals. And so we have residents associations or just individuals who don't like a particular development cloaking their opposition to, say, a set of townhomes or a walk-up apartment building in their neighborhood in spurious claims that a shadow falling on their backyard is some kind of environmental damage, or that losing a privet hedge or some, a privet. It's an ornamental hedge, or some manicured lawn is an environmental harm. When what we know, there's absolute consensus now among genuine environmentalists that we desperately need to add housing there, both to keep it out of actual habitat, actual farmland, but also because those existing neighborhoods, they have nowhere near the density and the mix of uses that they need in order to wean people off cars. Yeah. And we desperately need to get pretty much every neighborhood that we have now up to 90 or 100 people per hectare in order to meet our climate obligations.
Okay, let me circle back to something you said a moment ago. You said that environmental assessments were being used in an attempt to prohibit the construction of more bike lanes. What was the argument that you could use to say, we need an environmental assessment on whether it's appropriate to put a bike lane on street X, Y, or Z?
Well, truth be told, I never did hear a sound justification for it. It was a technical opportunity to delay the process based on a technical reading of the Environmental Assessment Act that, frankly, not everyone dealt with, that not everyone agreed with. And the good news is that that was corrected. There was clarifying language. What we need to see now is that kind of reform brought to the other ways that we assess environmental harm. With respect to land use planning rules, we need zoning that allows denser forms of housing as of right in existing neighborhoods. We've already gotten rid of the minimum parking requirements that were a major source of environmental problems. And so we basically need to replace the rules that keep the vast majority of residential land in the GTA reserved for the most environmentally damaging, wasteful, car-dependent forms of development. We need to replace them with new rules that aren't designed to preserve stability. They're designed to actively transform those communities by adding as many homes as we can, bringing them up to transit-supporting density quickly, adding those corner stores and shops so they become those 15-minute complete communities. It's about using law to promote change, the things that we want, rather than simply to preserve the status quo.
What you're doing now, I think I'm right about this, but you can tell me. What you're doing now, an environmentalist calling out the, in your judgment, abuse of environmental assessments to prohibit planning goals that you think are appropriate, that's something that's fairly new. I haven't seen this happen much over the years. Am I right in saying this is a fairly new thing?
I wouldn't quite say that that's right. So, for example, environmentalists were very much in favor of, if you recall, the renewable energy legislation that streamlined environmental assessments and replaced it with a different process to get wind turbines built quickly. And environmentalists were always opposed to the use of environmental assessment for things like bike lanes. And environmentalists were pushing for densification. The problem that we've had is folks who aren't really environmentalists sort of putting on the cloak of environmentalism to sort of immunize them from criticism, and often turning that into very successful political careers based on obstructing development in those suburban neighborhoods. Well, I'm a nonpartisan. We're a charity at Environmental Defense. We have to be nonpartisan. So I can't name names by name. But what I can do is say, for example, neighborhoods like Leaside, neighborhoods like Etobicoke Center, neighborhoods like Scarborough North, for years and years, incumbent councillors in those wards and the current incumbent councillors, they have been obstructing housing and preventing them from getting up to the densities that they need in order to allow the residents in those very neighborhoods to get by comfortably without a car. And meanwhile, on the other hand, I really have to look at the other side of it, and that is that 4 wards in the core of the city have accommodated something like 61% of population growth in recent years. And you would never know this from following social media, but those wards are the core wards: Toronto Centre, St. Paul's, it's University Rosedale, and Trinity Spadina. Those are the wards that are embracing growth.
There's lots of new condos in those areas and so on.
And it's a very interesting phenomenon because essentially you have the political coalition that's been behind the mayor on Toronto City Council, that's been, the NIMBY bloc on council, and, the main opposition bloc in Toronto that has frankly been very good about accommodating growth. And it's worth noting that those neighborhoods are already starting from a place that's much closer and often already where we need to be, and that's that 100 people and jobs per hectare. We need to keep the focus on neighborhoods that are low density, bringing them up to densities that support frequent, reliable transit and allow people to get out of their cars. And that means neighborhoods, like York Southweston and Mimico, and as I said, Central Scarborough, Scarborough Southwest. Those are very important places to add a lot of housing very quickly.
Okay, I appreciate that you're a charity and you're not prepared to name names for that reason, but we're having a municipal election in a matter of a couple of weeks. Do you want to give people some advice on what you think they ought to do?
Your absolute litmus test, if you care about the environment, if you are voting, if you are allocating your vote based on what's best for the environment, you've got to vote for someone who's committed to getting rid of exclusionary zoning in your neighborhood. And here's the big one. It can't just be about deregulation. You've got to vote for someone who is committed to increasing Toronto's overall target for population growth, if you live in Toronto, from something a little over 700,000, which is currently planned, to 1.4 million new Torontonians by 2051.
Here's the problem with this. I appreciate the advice, but you're asking people who live in neighborhoods that they like left the way they are to vote for things that will increase the population and density in their neighborhoods to potentially the way they don't want them. So why would people do that?
Well, I would question, first of all, whether that's really true. So Environmental Defense has done some very extensive...
Hang on, Phil. Of course it's true, because the people who get elected in those neighborhoods today are preventing increasing density because they know that their constituents don't want more density. Well, that's why 70% of the city, you can't put up more than a one-story bungalow.
So we have quite an incumbency advantage in Toronto.
For
but
sure.
What we know
Everywhere.
now is that there's been a sharp change in those attitudes because of the housing crisis, because of the starkness of the climate emergency, and because of the real attacks on farmland in the suburbs. There is a real consensus, certainly among folks who genuinely care about the environment now, that they want that housing in their neighborhoods. So we did a poll last year in April, that's before a lot of this advocacy happened, which shows that the vast majority of residents in those neighborhoods, those low-rise residential neighborhoods in Toronto, are now, they would support adding a lot of new homes in buildings of up to, apartments, walk-up apartments of 3 stories. Even there's more supporters than opponents in those neighborhoods for housing of 4 to 6 stories than there are. So there's a shift. Whatever may have been the case before, the prospect that, our kids may not be able to stay in that community. There's just not a place for them. They could be priced out of the community. The prospect that we may not be able to downsize in our own neighborhoods, it's becoming very stark for people, and it's causing people to change their minds. So I'd advise politicians not to trust, the old reliable view that nimbyism is always the safe way to go. I think that's changing now. I think that people are concerned about getting homes built in existing neighborhoods, and the polling that we've done backs that up.
We got a minute left here for me to ask you. Clearly, you don't seem to be a fan of the current mayor as it relates to.
I wouldn't say that. I won't say that. What I would say is that I'd like to see the mayor make a sharp U-turn in the approach that's been taken to policy. Whether it's the same mayor or a different mayor, that's indifferent to me.
In which case, who are you voting for on the 24th?
I can't tell you that.
As you look at the alternative candidates to the current mayor of Toronto, who do you like?
Listen, I got to stay away from the names, but I think we know who the main opponent, the main opposition figure of the mayor is. And certainly the policy proposals that the opposition has brought to bear in this campaign, they line up very much with what environmental defense's litmus test for Ontario is. But we're still hopeful that the mayor will also make that change and embrace our complete environmental litmus test for Ontario, which is available on the environmental website, environmental defense website.
You can be safe in the knowledge that CRA will not be coming after you as a result of this interview. There you go. That's Phil Pothen, Environmental Defense. Phil, thanks for coming into TVO tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thousands of properties in Ontario are legally recognized as having historic and/or architectural importance. Such a designation comes with protections and responsibilities. With us to understand how it works and why it might not always be as wholesome and heritage-focused as it might seem, let's welcome Stephanie Ma. She is president of the Toronto branch of the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario and creative director at JIMO. That's an architecture firm that integrates design and heritage conservation. And Alex Bezikovic is here. He's architecture critic for the Globe and Mail and author of 305 Lost Buildings of Canada. Did you find the buildings, incidentally?
We're still looking.
You're still looking. Okay, good. Anyway, great to have you guys here. I know you've been on this program many times in the past. This is the first time here.
That's right.
All right, great. And your first time as well?
First time.
Wonderful. Stephanie, putting you to work right away. The heritage designation, where does that come from in the first place?
Well, heritage in general, in the broadest terms, is what we value from our past and what we want to preserve for our future generations. But in Ontario, when you hear the term heritage designation, that's specifically referring to the Ontario Heritage Act.
So it's a provincial law.
Mm-hmm. And so the intention of this is to identify, recognize, and protect sites that have cultural heritage value. So a site doesn't need to be a building, it often is, but it could also be a landscape or a district. And the way we determine if something qualifies for designation is there is criteria under the Act as well. Things like, does it have physical value? Does it have historical or associative value? Or does it have contextual value? It doesn't need to have all of those, but it needs to have some of those. And so this was enacted in 1975, following a lot of heritage advocacy around concerns of our lost heritage sites. A notable one is Old City Hall in Toronto in the 60s, which was proposed for demolition, and of course is still with us today. So that's what it means when you hear heritage designation under the Act.
I would point out 1975 meant it was the Bill Davis government that put it in, and I only mention that because you're sitting in the Bill Davis studio right now.
Right.
He's also the godfather of TVO. Okay, in principle, Alex, a good thing that we have this act?
Absolutely it is.
Because?
Well, I mean, as Stephanie was saying, heritage is about preserving places that are important to us. And, in sort of plain language, it's either because the buildings are very good or very significant in an architectural sense, or because they have important social history attached to them, or as in the case of the old Toronto City Hall, both. And there was a moment prior to 1975 when we were tearing a lot of buildings down. In the United States and in Canada, these set of policies that are known as urban renewal involved remaking a lot of the city to remake it in a modern way, to eliminate neighborhoods that were seen as blighted, to create new infrastructure for cars, and in the process clear away a lot of buildings that were seen as not valuable. And we threw away a lot of important things in that period.
So we made some mistakes there.
We definitely did. I think the question now is whether the pendulum has swung too far in the other direction.
Okay, and your view is?
My view is that it has.
And that means what?
Well, heritage has expanded now in a way that the people who moved heritage forward in the 1960s and 70s would find very surprising. You know, the number of listed and designated heritage buildings, even in the city of Toronto, was well into the thousands, you know, which is far more than the original advocates of heritage preservation in that period would have expected. And on the one hand, heritage is expanding to take in more kinds of stories and more kinds of places, which is absolutely necessary. On the other hand, heritage is also becoming an obstacle to the growth of our cities, which is going to be a real problem for our housing, for the housing crisis and for the climate crisis as well.
Do you agree with that characterization, Stephanie?
I think it's a complicated situation.
That sounds like a no.
Of heritage. There's points that Alex is making that I do agree with. That we're certainly seeing instances of what we would call nimbyism or not in my backyard attitudes that might use heritage in an attempt to block development. That exists, but I don't think that's reflective of the heritage profession, and I don't think it is the intention of heritage either.
Okay, can you just take us back? If let's say you represent a neighborhood organization or something, and you see an old building and you think it deserves to be protected, not demolished, etc. How do you get the thing designated as a heritage preservation site?
It's quite a complicated process. It's a very long process as well. And so I think when defining heritage, it's also helpful to note that a lot of buildings are heritage, but they're not heritage designated.
And that makes a difference.
Yes. Designated means that there is protection under the Ontario Heritage Act.
And who does the designating?
It's a process of doing reports. The city staff will do reports into looking into, is there heritage value? How I said there's that criteria you have to go through.
But the city does it.
Municipalities will pass a bylaw to designate something.
And do you agree with him that I mean, Alex says there's thousands of places that are now receiving this designation that maybe not all deserve it. Do you agree with that?
I would say actually that I think there's a lot of buildings that are deserving of heritage designation that don't have designation yet, because it's such a long process to get that there's plenty of buildings that have heritage value that maybe haven't had time to go through this process yet, or because we have such a narrow definition of what counts as heritage. There's buildings that have a lot of cultural significance that are left out of this designation process, and a lot of diverse narratives that get excluded through the system.
Now, as you said that, did you see the look on his face when you said that?
I didn't. I'm looking at you.
You're looking at me. Well, I can tell you what he did. He got this big smile on his face, which made me think, I don't know if he agrees with that. Go ahead.
Well, it's complicated, and this is why talking about these issues, you know, you have to bring a little bit of nuance to it, because I think that in part Stephanie's right, that there are a number of sites and sort of categories of places that we have been overlooking. The problem is that heritage over the last 40 years, I think, has gone too far in recognizing certain kinds of places. And those certain kinds of places tend to be houses that were either occupied by elites, who are currently occupied by elites, and are therefore untouchable. And so, you know, and particularly in Toronto, large stretches of the city are now effectively unchangeable.
Can you give us an example of a house where quote unquote, an elite person once upon a time lived, and therefore the house isn't being touched now?
I mean, the entire neighborhood of Rosedale is a heritage conservation district, which, you know, 2/3 of it are Class A heritage, so they're effectively, you know, can't be touched in a way that's visible. Big chunks of the annex have also received the same treatment, big chunks of Cabbagetown. All of these neighborhoods that were or are now really elite neighborhoods with fairly small populations, and which have a history with the heritage preservation movement. So I guess I would say that, you know, this is true in other places as well, that, you know, heritage went a long way in trying to protect certain kinds of house neighborhoods built before 1940, and we've done, I think, far too much of that, while at the same time perhaps not doing enough to think about other kinds of places.
Well, can I give you an honest-to-goodness real-life example here? There's a house in downtown Toronto on the campus of the U of T on St. George Street called MacDonald Mowat House. And it's called that because the first Prime Minister of Canada and the longest-serving Premier of Ontario both lived there, not at the same time, but they both lived in that home. Now, the U of T owns the home, and you know, at some point that land is so bloody expensive, someone's going to want to rip it down and put up a condo or a student residence or something like that. Should that be allowed?
No. I mean, the short answer is no.
So you're okay with preserving that one?
Some, you know, I think there's a certain number of places for reasons of social history or architectural history or both, and certainly that would be one. You know, that's also a very old house, which has all sorts of significance associated with it. I think that's really clear. You know, the problem is not when you are dealing with the most, 100 or 200 or 500 most important sites in a large city like Toronto. It's when you get down to number 3,000 and 4,000, and those ranks keep getting larger that I think we start to have a problem.
Okay, I'm going to infer that you're probably going to give me an amen on saving the McDonald Mowat House, right? You okay with saving that one?
Yes.
Can you give me an example of something that you think, okay, you've got a designation, but you probably don't deserve it? You want to give me an example of that?
I'm not sure I can off the top of my head. I think the challenge with this conversation, though, is that it ultimately is kind of pitting housing and heritage against each other. And I don't know that I don't agree in either direction. We need more housing. We clearly have a housing shortage. But there is a lot of value in heritage as well. And so I think that the challenge with this conversation is it's overlooking the fact that heritage and housing can absolutely work together. There doesn't need to be blocking development. And a recent example of that that people might have seen in the news is the Foundry site in West Don Lands in Toronto, where there's...
You should just, for people living outside Toronto, you should just sort of give us a bit of the lay of the land there.
It's an industrial heritage designated building in the West Don Lands.
West Don Lands, which is actually in the east end of the city.
Yes.
Complicated,
yes.
But anyway, there you go.
It was being demolished without notice. And the community worked together to advocate against that to make sure it was conserved. So it is conserved now. That doesn't mean that development isn't moving ahead on that site. There still will be development there. There still will be towers there. It'll be high density, which is what we need, more housing.
What did they preserve?
The industrial buildings that are designated there.
Okay, you okay with that?
Yes, well, they're preserving some of them, right? And this is actually, I think, a really good model because that's a site that's large enough to keep some of the buildings that are significant intact while also putting a new building on the site, and that building is tall. What often comes up in heritage conservation districts and in adjacent places adjacent to heritage buildings is that other sort of planning and urban design ideas come into play. And it becomes very difficult to build a large building in proximity to one that is seen as significant. So it's not just that the building or a piece of the building needs to be saved, it's that what happens around it is limited. And that to me is an idea that absolutely needs to go out the window.
Stephanie, does it make sense to protect all old buildings just because they're old?
I would say just because they're old, I'm not sure if that is the only value that buildings bring. There's certainly some value in age, but there's also a lot of other value that we need to be considering. Things like social history, cultural implications to places that are meaningful to communities. And there's also the environmental aspect. I would say it's absolutely worth taking time to consider, is demolition really necessary on every site when we are in a climate crisis right now?
But let's go back to the West Don Lands.
Sure.
What is it about the old structures that were there that date back to, a different time in the city that you think, besides the fact that they're old, makes them worth preserving?
I don't think it's age specifically for those buildings either, and I don't think we need to always focus on age because there's buildings that have architectural significance, cultural significance that are only built in the 60s and the 70s even, and so with the Foundry, it's the industrial heritage, the role that played in developing that neighborhood, in developing the city. And so there's other things beside age that we do need to be considering.
Okay. And what they have decided to preserve on the West Don Lands in the east end of the city, in your judgment, Alex, is worth preserving?
I would say so, with some qualifications.
Okay.
It's a site where not only does that site, it's a site where parts were made essentially for rail. Right, and this was an area surrounded by rail yards, and the role of the railways in building the city of Toronto, as in other cities, is clearly very important. And these buildings are not of amazingly high design quality, but they are largely intact and they're worth saving. with the sort of compromise that's available there of being able to put in, some serious density on the site at the same time and sort of accomplish two goals at once.
Okay, Stephanie, let me take you to an example. In the capital city here, the Heritage Department apparently recently designated a number of storefronts on Queen Street East and the Danforth, which presumably very much restricts what kind of future development can take place in those locations. Do you think, using these specific examples, that's going to adversely affect an attempt to get more intensified housing built on those spots?
I think the challenge with that, the narrative of saying that it's blocking development there, is that, as we said earlier, there's a lot of nuance. So these properties on the Danforth are not designated buildings, they're listed buildings, and there's different meanings in that. So they don't have protection under the Ontario Heritage Act. So the process there doesn't mean that no development can happen. And the concern I have with pushing this narrative that no development will happen there is at my office, actually, we're an architecture firm, and we've had a client actually say to us, oh, we were going to propose, we were going to develop a site there, but we heard in the news that heritage planning has stopped all development there.
And that's not accurate.
And that's not accurate. And so we had to look at the site that they were interested in and reassure them, actually, you can develop here, and there's a process behind it, and there's creative solutions we can go forward with. And so for me, as someone who wants to see a lot more housing in this city, who needs more housing in this city, it's frustrating to me to hear that misinformation is being spread.
Do you think, though, that, I'm trying to find sort of the sweet spot between you two, because he thinks there's too much heritage designation going on for inappropriate reasons, and you're not quite there yet. What do you two agree on?
I think the need for more housing and maybe the need for prioritizing what should be designated, I think.
In which case, Alex, what do you disagree on?
I think it's really a question of nuance. I think we just have to come, Stephanie was just talking a moment ago about the set of properties along Danforth Avenue, which is a commercial main street, as it's known. And it is an obstacle to redeveloping those small buildings as larger ones which contain housing.
Which you think needs to happen?
I think it absolutely needs to happen. Here is the tricky thing, though. There's some peculiar things happening in Toronto right now that are sort of specific and idiosyncratic, and we need to look at these heritage questions in a larger context. Much of the city of Toronto is effectively off limits to apartment buildings. Depending on how you do the math, there's maybe 5% of the entire city where it is theoretically legal to build an apartment building. And those places already have stuff on them, right? And one of the narrow places where it is possible to build a lot of new housing is along streets such as the Danforth. So there's one tiny little line on the map where it is possible to add some new density. And the city's heritage planners have come onto that very same line and inserted a whole lot of new regulations that make it harder to build density.
What would be your view on that, Stephanie?
I think Alex touched on a really important part about there's a lot of places in the city that we can't build in. And I think that's a bigger issue to the housing crisis, that we need to look at where we can and can't build. And so if we were to hypothetically just push this even forward, let's say that heritage doesn't exist. You can now build on any property. That wouldn't suddenly solve the housing crisis. It's a much bigger and more complicated process. You would still have people who are opposing development with a NIMBY attitude, and they would just use other reasons, things like shadows or there's noise from construction. So that would still exist. So it wouldn't solve an issue, and it would also just make our cities worse because we're overshadowing what is the value of heritage here and how it contributes to quality of living, which we also need to be considering when we're thinking about housing, and also the sustainability aspect of how important it is to be preserving buildings and reusing them when we have climate change negatively impacting us.
Let's finish up on that. We've got a couple of minutes left here, and I do want to talk about what heritage designations have to do with climate change. What's the connection?
The connection there is heritage designation in theory can sometimes block demolition, and I think we should be thinking about, do we need to be demolishing every building? Demolition has significant negative impacts to our environment. If we all can understand the idea of reusing a water bottle, then we can maybe think about how big a water bottle is compared to how big a building is. When we're just throwing away these buildings, that's an incredible amount of wasted material and wasted embodied carbon that's within these buildings. And so I think it is worth time, even in a housing crisis, Congress is to be considering, should we be demolishing this? Because we all know that as climate change progresses, the most vulnerable communities will be negatively impacted by it the most, and that's also a problem for housing. So all of these things are very complicated and connected and should be considered together.
Do you think she's made a good argument here against demolition?
I think she's made an excellent argument. I just think the way in which it interacts with heritage needs to be unpacked a little bit. It's a good example that's happening in the Annex neighborhood in Toronto right now, one of the hotbeds of heritage historically. A landlord family who owns an apartment building with about 100 units is now applying to tear it down and to replace this apartment building with a new, larger building, which will rehouse.
Which would be purpose-built rental still?
I think it will be part condo and part rental.
Okay.
So rental to rehouse the existing tenants and new condo. So adding a bunch of density by demolishing a building that has 100+ apartments in it. And that is, in an environmental sense, crazy. And yet, at the same time, if you look at that neighborhood, right behind that building is a row of houses. Those houses have very little embodied energy. Very few people live in those houses. It would be cheaper and easier to tear those houses down and to build a new apartment building, and yet that is illegal.
And it's not going to happen under any circumstances.
It's not going to happen unless we change our planning policy, including heritage, in a way that allows for that to happen. So I think we need to look at the whole picture of, thinking about, in a material sense, what are the assets that we already have? Where do people live already as well? And think about, maybe reconsidering some of our ideas about valuing houses, which are connected to heritage, and letting some of those go in exchange for allowing new people to move in.
What's the status of this? An attempt to take down this apartment building and replace it with something bigger?
It's in progress, and it's very likely to go forward because the way planning works in Toronto is that if you have a site that has the zoning specific regulations for an apartment building, you can put an apartment building on it. And so there are a number of developers and landlords who see this opportunity to replace an old building with a new, larger one. And depending on how that's done, I don't think it's necessarily unethical. It's certainly legal. But the fact that we have planned our cities in a way that now makes sense is insane.
And on that note of insanity, I want to thank you two for coming in today and having a really stimulating conversation about something we don't necessarily think about every day. So thanks to Alex Bezikovic and Stephanie Ma. Much appreciated.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
And that is the agenda for Wednesday, October 12th, 2022. Gen Z, or Z as we might say in Canada, is arriving into the workforce in growing numbers. But tomorrow, Nam Kiwanuka finds out why some of them have already embraced what's being called quiet quitting. Tune in for more. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org. And Nam, we'll see you here tomorrow.